The Hopkins Manuscript by R.C. Sherriff. So first off, I'd like to thank one of the viewers of this channel, Seth, for recommending this book to me. I've mentioned many times in the past that one of my favorite subgenres of science fiction is post-apocalyptic. And I've gotten all kinds of recommendations from many viewers, but this one kind of stood out because I'd never heard of the book, I'd never heard of the author, and when I looked it up, I saw that it was from 1939 and had really good reviews. So that intrigued me, and originally I found this copy that was recently reprinted, I believe in 2023 from Scribner's, and this is a trade paperback, and you might be able to find this at your local bookstore or on any online retailers, which is good news because I think this book was fantastic and I think it needs some more attention to a modern reader. It holds up really well considering it was written in the late 30s. Now after that, I was browsing one of my local bookstores and I found this book club edition that was published sometime in the 60s. And I picked this up for $10 at one of my local bookstores. And this one's really cool. This is one that I'm going to keep in my personal collection. It has some illustrations throughout. And both of them include a map at one point in the novel. But I don't want to show you the map because it could give away some plot points in that. So even though this book revolves around this major cataclysmic event, I've heard a lot of people call this a cozy catastrophe. And I can kind of get that because a lot of the writing and a lot of what you will be reading throughout this book is kind of a day-to-day goings-on in the life of a small English village. You'll get to learn a little bit about breeding chickens, and it just has that kind of cozy feel until you get to some of the bigger events. And so we'll get into the plot here. A couple things are given away right in the beginning of this one that I think helps really carry the narrative through the whole story. In the very beginning, there's a foreword, and this is the only thing written not from the point of view of our main character, Edgar Hopkins. And we find that there's some people traveling around Western Europe looking for clues or writings or whatever they can find that will give them some insight to what happened during this big event. And we find out this is about 700 years after this event, and most of Western Europe is been completely wiped out. The population is virtually nothing, and we find out that most of these people are from the East. And then once we get into the book, we meet our main character, Edgar Hopkins, and he's in London after this event has happened, so we know there's some survivors, and he's telling you that he's writing this manuscript to lock away and hide, and hopefully someone in the future will find this and it will give them some insight to what happened during these events. So we know that someone does stumble across this in the book, and that kind of sets up the overall plot of this book. Now, our main character, Edgar, he's pretty intelligent. He's well educated. He decides to move out to a small English village to kind of focus on his passion, which is breeding chickens. But he's also part of the British Lunar Society. And some of these astronomers and scientists in this society start noticing that the moon is making its way towards the Earth. And they do some calculations and figure out that we only have maybe 4 months, or maybe it's a little bit longer than that when they first discover it. But they calculated it all out, and they have a date that they come up with when the moon is going to strike the Earth. But at first, they swear everyone to secrecy, and they're not supposed to tell anybody. But eventually, as the moon keeps getting closer, they realize they need to get this information out, and they contact the politicians and the religious leaders, and basically they pick a day and announce it to the world. So the first half of this book is all of those events basically leading up to this event where the moon is going to strike the Earth. And then the second half of the book kind of goes on beyond that and shows you what happens after some survivors that are left have to kind of face this kind of bleak reality. So that's basically the whole plot of this book, but the joy of reading this is the writing and R.C. Sherriff's insight into human nature, because even when the scientists and these astronomers have these secrets, you get to see how their decision-making progress goes of when to get this information out. And then once they release it to the world, you get so many different reactions. You get people that just choose not to believe that scientists know what they're talking about. You get people that think that the moon is just going to bounce off of the Earth like a billiard ball and head out into the cosmos. You get people that stick your head in the sand, and people that start to panic, especially as we get closer and closer to this event. And if you would have asked younger Ira, I would not have thought this part of the book was plausible. And either I'm getting way more cynical in my older age or maybe more observant, but it does seem like some pretty plausible reactions. And even on the Goodreads page of this novel, on the main description, they talk about the movie Don't Look Up. And if you've seen that movie, you get a lot of the same vibes going on there. And then after that event happens, I don't want to go into the details of what exactly happens, but we'll just say, there's survivors. We know that because it was given away in the very beginning of the book. And then you get into some more aspects of human nature, maybe some darker aspects of human nature. And I think that was done extraordinarily well, and it keeps you reading all the way up to the end. So you also get to see the growth of our main character. He is not a perfect person. He has flaws, but you get to see him change throughout the course of this novel. And that's another really good aspect of this book. There's not much that I didn't like about this book. I would say some of the science, is definitely a little iffy with some of this collision with the moon and the Earth. But you got to put it into context that this was written in 1939, and I'll easily give R.C. Sherriff a pass on that. And besides, this event was just, it's there to kind of set up all of these themes of human nature and the psychology of man. So you could focus on that if you wanted to, but I used it as a crisis or a conflict, and the book gets a lot more deeper than that. So if you get a chance to pick this one up, I definitely recommend you read this one. And Seth, once again, thanks for the recommendation. So next up, I'm reading The Embedding by Ian Watson. So just look for that one coming out next. And once again, thanks for watching.